Hello and welcome to another screencast. This one's dedicated to moving your audio tracks around in Final Cut Pro. Before we actually move any files, I want to show you a few tools that make your life easy when you're working with audio. First off, it's very handy to see a waveform view of your audio file. This is a visual representation of the audio file. You can turn this on by going down to this little arrow menu here, and then you can show audio waveforms. You can turn that off, the waveforms disappear. And if you turn it on, the waveforms reappear. The waveforms also update when you zoom into a file and when you zoom out. Just next to that little menu there is a small sort of bar graph icon. This allows you to adjust the height of the track. So if you're working with loads of tracks, you can reduce the height so you can see them all. If you're working with a few less tracks or want to see a bigger scale, then you can go up the scale and the tracks get larger as you go up. You've also got your little speaker button here for the audio controls. With this switched off, they disappear to the left. With it switched on, they reappear. And using these, you can use the solo buttons to hear just that track on its own, or you can add in more solo tracks to hear more of them, or you can use the mute button to not hear a track if that's what you're after. Okay, so let's have a think about moving tracks around. Let's have a look at this edit. I'm going to use my Shift-Z key command to put it into timeline view. I'm going to reduce the height of the track so we can see a lot more. First off, I want to talk about ordering your tracks. So you need to realize what's the most important bit of audio at any specific time. Usually dialogue takes precedent over everything else, so that's going to be our first track. At the top of the tree is going to be dialogue, so I don't want anything on tracks 1 and 2 that isn't dialogue. Second, atmospheres and sound effects are going to come on our tracks 3 and 4, and then finally music is going to be on the final tracks. I do have a load of empty tracks though, so let's deal with those first. If you go over to the left hand side of the timeline, you can control click in this area here and choose delete track, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete the rest of these empty tracks so they're not cluttering up our timeline, confusing us. Just one more to go. Okay, let's pull this timeline out a little bit so we can see the whole of the edit. So as you can see, our music is down here. I have another music track here, so I'm going to move this down to the same track as the other music file. If I just click and move it, I can quite easily move it horizontally as well as vertically. This isn't great when you're moving files around. So what I would suggest doing is hold down Shift and then move it. And this stops it moving horizontally. So I can actually keep that sync exactly how it was on the previous track, but just move it down. Doorbells, they're going to stay there because they're kind of sound effect. I'm going to move my atmospheres down to tracks 5 and 6, so I can either select each file, and notice that link selection is switched off. If I have link selection on, that's going to select the video track as well, so you definitely need to turn that off if you're moving your tracks around. These first 3 audio tracks are atmospheres, so I'm going to select them by using a marquee, drag across them, hold down my Shift, and then drag them down to tracks 5 and 6. Dialogue is going to stay up on the topmost track, and then I'm going to work my way through, and any other atmospheres I'm going to select them, shift click, and then drag them down to the atmosphere. That way everything ends up on the same track. So you've got your music tracks at the bottom, your sound effects and atmospheres, and then your dialogues at the top. So when you're thinking about mixing, always think what's the most important thing. That way dialogue is going to stay at the top. If there's no dialogue happening, then the atmosphere can be brought up. If there's no atmosphere, then the music can be brought up. Hopefully that's going to give you a good starting point for working with sound in Final Cut Pro.